So the other day I got a text from my old band leader about a potential gig this summer. Nothing big, he probably just needed a fill-in, but it got me thinking for the first time in a while, since it would be the first time that I played guitar live in almost a year. I had all these questions I was working through, like, would I get nervous? How much preparation time would it take? Do I still remember all these lead lines from last year? Everything was sort of up in the air in my head. That is with just one simple exception, because if I took this gig, I knew without a shadow of a doubt in my mind which guitar I was going to take. It was definitively going to be this guy, but this isn't just any guitar. This is a wingman from a builder called Baum in the Netherlands. And from the beginning of 2024 until I stopped playing gigs halfway through that year, this was my main live guitar, like the one, and I want to tell you why. So this all sort of started when this guy first hit my doorstep. It was like a 6-month process of just getting the guitar to my apartment. So the anticipation of what it was going to be like in person had grown as much as it ever could have. I knew absolutely nothing about Baum guitars outside of the fact that they were based in the Netherlands, and from the little research that I did, it looked like they may specialize in these sort of weirder offset guitars, but I had no clue what I was actually in for. So when I finally started playing it through the pedal board I had built at the time, I realized that I might have a very pleasant surprise on my hands. Because at first glance, this guitar very obviously resembles like a non-reverse Firebird shape, a guitar that I had seen used a lot with some of the blues rock guys, and although I love me some blues rock, that was probably never going to be my first choice or even a choice at all. So when I started hearing the tones coming out of this, it was absolutely nothing like the sound I had in my mind in reference to a non-reverse Firebird. And while a lot of that sentiment did come from trying it out with the overdriven and the distortion thing, a lot of what surprised me about this guitar actually came from the clean tones. So much so that one Saturday night when I was prepping to play the next morning, I was getting the tones ready on the Helix, and I thought to myself, what would actually be the best guitar for tomorrow? I usually bring the Pink Telly because that's the guitar that I know the best, but just for a second I thought, what would the Wingman actually sound like over this set list? So I started to play with this thing and just tweak the settings little by little, and next thing I knew, it was in the back of my trunk on the way to play the next morning. And once I started playing it in context with the band, I was even more shook at just how comfortable I was with the tones and how it felt not just sitting in my lap. I decided if I liked it that much at the first gig, I might as well bring it to the next one, right? So I did, and I kept bringing it, and I kept realizing more and more specifically what I liked about it and what made this thing special. Now, like I was saying before, the thing I seemed to really like about these pickups, especially when it came to the neck, was just how surprisingly warm it was. And for a lot of the rhythm stuff that I was doing, that just sort of felt right. Originally, I thought that's because these were P90s, but the more research I did, I found out that these are actually Jazzmaster style single coils in a more P90 type of enclosure, but they still didn't make this guitar sound like a Jazzmaster, especially when I went back to my buddy, the neck pickup. And that led me to do even more research on why this guitar would sound so good with it being like one of their more mass-produced models, and I found out that it's because they didn't just stick any pickups in here. These are in-house made, like proprietary pickups. And the more I played through the different positions, which is not exempt from the middle, it all made sense. As well as the bridge. warmth that came with the tone that I was getting out of this thing, because 80% of the time when I find myself playing in the bridge position, I'm usually doing the overdriven or even distorted lead thing. But the few times I was trying to get that clean thing out of the bridge, even with the tone knob dimed, it never felt like obnoxiously bright. But the pickups were really only just one part of what made this one of the go-tos from me. The other big part happened to be the construction, of which some parts really hit me and some parts took me a little more time to get into once I researched them. Now, the first thing that hit me construction-wise with this guitar, as with any, were the aesthetics of the body shape, especially since I was going through this big reconciliation with offset guitars. I'd spent the majority of my guitar playing journey just completely hating them and thinking they were the ugliest things ever, but over the years, things slowly changed when the Jazzmaster started to grow and grow on me, and the floodgates really opened in December of 2023 when I got my first Jazzmaster, and I was like, okay, let me see what else is out there, especially in terms of these offsets. Now, like we were saying before, this is way more of a non-reverse Firebird shape than it is a Jazzmaster, and I think that's what really set it apart, especially in a lot of the contexts that I was going to. You never see anything like this at a church gig. Not that you couldn't, but I've never seen anyone bring a non-reverse Firebird to a worship gig. It had given me a very similar feeling to when I had brought my Les Paul Jr. to those sorts of gigs, except for this was even more unique and fit in much better tonally. But it was about more than just aesthetics, especially when it came to things like the neck, which was probably playability-wise the thing that stuck out the least to me. It was all pretty standard, 12-inch neck radius, C-shaped neck, but knowing that it wasn't necessarily the neck made me really think about what it was construction-wise that made me love this guitar so much live, and I figured it out. It was actually the weight. You see, my Pink Telly, my main guitar, my most prized guitar in this entire world, even as a Strat player, well, it's really, really heavy. And I don't think I fully realized that until I actively started bringing other guitars to different gigs. Because even though I'm mainly playing in a setting where we're only playing 3 or 4 songs at a time, when you go through an hour-long rehearsal where you have a heavy guitar strapped on your back, that can start to take a toll on you. And when you start to factor in other types of gigs that I and all of us have played, where you're there for 3 or 4 hours, standing there with the same guitar with no breaks, that can really, really start to take a toll on your shoulders. By the way, let me know in the comments if you've ever had any stories with crazy gigs where you've had to be on your feet for 3 or 4 or 5 plus hours with like an 11-pound Les Paul Standard. Now, there's one other layer that I think we need to address with a guitar like this, because I think, I know that for most players, when you're playing a guitar from a newer or a smaller brand, it's a completely different experience. And I'm not even just talking about Baum guitars in this situation. Whenever you have a smaller or newer builder, it's not like you're going from Fender to G&L, where even though one of those companies is clearly much larger, you're still talking about 2 relatively huge entities in the guitar world. There's a definitive excitement factor, whether good or bad, in knowing that you're going to be bringing something to a gig that's going to stick out in a way that most guitars, even some of the guitar companies that we call smaller, are not. And I've seen it with other companies over the years similar to this, like Fano Guitars or Veritas, where they're making these really cool guitars, and they're not necessarily making them like the Fenders of the world, but the uniqueness and the general high quality is what makes it stick out and what makes people really want them. And subconsciously, outside of a lot of the more practical factors, that probably is a lot of the reason why I like this guitar. I live in a town where whenever you go to any sort of gigs, you're gonna have guys bringing $2, $3, $4, even $5,000 guitars. Not that anyone would ever consider a $1,700 guitar under the cheap or budget price range, but a lot of the times it does feel cooler when you go unique over expensive, especially when it comes and can appropriately fit into whatever you're trying to do tonally or even aesthetically when it matters for live gigs. So at the end of the day, what, if anything, did we learn? And I think it's really cool to see different types of guitars and how you feel about them in different scenarios, whether live or in the studio or just for home recording. The Wingman is a great guitar. It sounds great, it's built great, but there are way more factors than just whatever the pickups sound like that would make something my or any person's #1 guitar in the studio or in the live session. Different guitars have different uses, and I love knowing that I have a guitar with an extremely specific use. At the end of the day, I don't think it matters what I think. What matters is what you think. So have you heard of Baum? Have you tried them? What do you think is the guitar that you think is the most unique that people need to know about? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I've been wanting to make another Wingman video for quite a while, and this seemed just like the perfect time since getting that request to play live and thinking, oh, okay, this guitar might have to come back in the same spot that it was all those months ago because it was so much fun playing it live. Also, I really enjoy making videos about smaller brands that people might not have heard of before that aren't just the usual G&L or even Sire that really feel like they're rising through the ranks. But if you want to know anything more about this guitar or any of the other amps, cameras, mics that I use in this video, the links are in the description. Make sure to check them out. One of the best ways to support the channel, if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in any of these videos, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all of my patrons. There's some extra exclusive content on there if you want to join the community. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic night.